Hello, everyone. My name is Cordell Carter from the Aspen Institute Socrates program. It is indeed a pleasure to welcome you all once again to our weekly webinar series. This is the last of a five-part series that we have embarked upon over the previous 4 weeks, where we looked at our current moment in American history from a variety of vantage points. We have had corporate executives, we've had CEOs, we've had financiers. Today we have folks that are doing some of the most interesting capitalist solutions in our poorest communities across the country. I'm pleased to present, it's called Creating a Higher Form of Capitalism, how business can be the catalyst for the revitalization of urban communities. We have two amazing guests today. Firstly, we have Mark Wilson, who is the president and CEO of Chime Solutions. He is an entrepreneur and based in Atlanta. Chime Solutions is a leading provider of business process outsourcing services, primarily focused in customer care. And Mark has over 25 years experience in the information services industry with companies such as Dun & Bradstreet, ABF Freight Systems, and the Whirlpool Corporation. And he's also served in roles responsible for strategic planning, service process improvement, and customer service. He took all of that great experience and brought it to some of our poorest communities in America to change people's lives according to his values. He is going to be in conversation today with Miss Beverly Norman Cooper, who's famous when it comes to diversity supply chain because she's a former executive director of the National Supplier Diversity Program at Kaiser Permanente, where she oversaw an increased spend among certified women and minority-owned companies from 1.3 billion to 2.3 billion in less than 3 years. In 2014, Kaiser Permanente became the first healthcare provider in the nation to sit at the prestigious billion-dollar roundtable. And this is a small group of industry-leading companies that have promised to spend over $1 billion with diverse suppliers annually. After Beverly recently retired, she is still in the work, doing this amazing work, helping companies do it. She's also bringing solutions like Chime to Baltimore City, where she now resides. Beverly, Mark, we're looking forward to an amazing conversation. And to our audience, please note, please ask your questions in the Q&A field. At about 30 minutes, we'll come back on and we'll answer your questions. But I'm so excited for you today to hear from these two amazing professionals that are doing some of the most interesting work in the country. Beverly, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you so much for having Mark and me. We really appreciate this opportunity and to be part of this amazing community, Aspen Institute. And so let me, as Cordell so very eloquently said, Mark and I are going to really have a robust conversation and discussion just about what is possible. Right? I mean, I think in this day and age with COVID-19 and the social unrest, lots of organizations are looking for solutions. And while we're not saying this is the only solution, we believe it is something that we can actually use as a model for how other communities across the nation can really take this, replicate it, and do good in the world. So Mark, let me start with you, and if you would just sort of share your story, and then I'll come back and share a little bit of my journey, and then we're just gonna have a conversation.
Yes, thank you, Beverly, and thank you to the Aspen Institute and the Socrates program for allowing the opportunity for me to be here with you and to kind of share some of the things that we're doing today that I think are really special. And Chime Solutions was really born out of my experience working corporately in the outsourced call center world. I really did this work internal for Dun & Bradstreet for a number of years. And then I had an opportunity to start my own company in support of that company. And so we took that opportunity and started the first venture that I had in the call center space called Ryla Teleservices. We did really well with that over a number of years, and ultimately had an opportunity to sell that business, and we did. And over the years, a couple of years after that, we had a chance to get back into the space with my leadership team that had been a part of that growth that was in Ryla, and we started Chime. And we started Chime with the intention this time to be more intentional about having an impact on the community. So for the work that the company has been charged to do for our clients, we could see where we could leverage that to create jobs in underserved communities and have a larger impact. And I'm really excited to be here today to kind of talk about some of the details of what we're doing through that model.
Great, thanks, Mark. So let me share a little bit of my journey and my history and how Mark and I came to really know each other and work on this project here in Baltimore City called the Baltimore Dream Team. So to begin, let me sort of first say to all of the philanthropists who are on this call, on this webinar, I am very pro philanthropy. I believe in the power of philanthropy to do good, both socially and in the public, for the public good. And without it, we definitely would not have our libraries and our hospitals and parks and public services. But I also believe in the explosive power of capitalism. And I think that we are called at this moment in our history to look at capitalism as the same force for good that we look at philanthropy. And here's how I think we can make that happen. When I was at Kaiser Permanente, the last 3 years before I retired, I had the honor to work with the late Bernard J. Tyson. And for any of you who know Bernard, he was an extraordinary visionary, very, very passionate about really looking at how to uplift communities all across the nation. So when I got the call to say that I had gotten the job as the National Supplier Diversity Executive Director, within 3 months, I had this email from Bernard saying, come see me, I want to hear about your vision. Of course, I wanted to basically just hang on. But what Bernard allowed me to do, and in some ways forced me to do, was to think about, could we pivot the program that had been built over years at Kaiser Permanente by some amazing, wonderful people? Could we change that program and focus it, shift the focus slightly from what we came to call moving beyond spend to making spend count? And what we meant by that was, you can spend money in your corporate purchasing program, and you can count those dollars. But are those dollars making a difference in the communities that need them most? And with Bernard's permission, and basically he also challenged us to say, that's a bold vision, Beverly, but I think you can go even bolder. And we're like, okay, let's just start with where we are now, Bernard. And what we decided to do was to really focus on not just, again, how much we were spending, but whether we were making an impact with that spend. And one of the ways we did that was to really invest in the capability that allowed us to look by zip code, whether that spend was creating and supporting jobs in communities across our footprint, whether it was creating tax revenue that would benefit roads and schools and public services. So it was, again, Bernard's amazing leadership that really allowed us to look at very different ways to look at some of our suppliers. Mark enters the picture because I did not know Mark until last year. We participated on a panel, the White House HBCU panel, and I was talking about Kaiser and Bernard, and Mark's like, by the way, I'm one of your suppliers. And oh, by the way, I'm actually thinking about, expanding my operation from Atlanta, where I have about 1,200 employees, to Charlotte, to Dallas, and I'm thinking about Baltimore. And of course, that's where the Baltimore Dream Team came in. So let me just give you 2 minutes about the Baltimore Dream Team. And then Mark, I want to talk to you a little bit about, again, your model, which really is a job catalyst, right? When I think about regenerating communities across the nation, community by community, the role of supplier diversity in my mind is huge. And most Fortune 500 companies spend billions. Their supply chain, their annual spend on IT services, staffing, call centers, catering, office supplies is the multiple most of these organizations. Supplier diversity really says, how can we take that spend that exists already? We're not talking about increasing it necessarily, but how can we take the existing spend and be intentional by looking for suppliers like Mark, who can actually go into a neighborhood and not just create jobs, but create something for the social good and a public good. So when Mark said he was looking to expand to Baltimore City, of course, that was, I was standing on the edge of my chair because that was really exciting news, particularly given that Bernard had at one point said that he really wanted to see Baltimore and West Baltimore become much more rigorous and robust. So let me sort of shift, Mark, to you. So please talk a little bit about, again, I think what you have sort of talked about in your opening is really a model that is really a standard model. And yours is not a standard model at all. Part of it is, again, your financial literacy programs and the commitment you've made to the people who work there. Can you speak a little bit about that? And then I have some additional questions.
Sure. When I said we made the decision to try to have what we do with providing customer service for our clients and do that by going into these underserved communities around the country, we also had the intention of trying to help the folks that are going to be the folks working in our company. And so we instituted something called Total Life. Total Life is really an approach that said that for every obstacle, barrier, impediment that would be in front of a person to reach their full potential while working in our company, we would try to programmatically do things to remove those barriers so that we can have people have the full opportunity to reach their full potential. So, and those things we found, there's three main things that really got in the way of the folks that work for us. And that had to do with childcare, transportation, and stable housing. And so we instituted we have a Chime University is a vehicle for which we do the development and provide development for the folks that work in our company. And so we put classes that really attack and address all three of those. And, an example would be for home ownership. I had the good fortune of interfacing with one of our leaders, actually a young lady who kind of grew up in our company, started out entry level and moved up and now is one of our leaders. And she was, interested in buying a home, and she came in and we had a conversation about the things that she needed to, as far as help and guidance. I helped her through that process, and she ultimately bought a house. And it was a game changer for all of us because I could see through her that we could do some good around the housing issue by taking the same approach that I had taken by helping her. So we put into the Chime University a component that deals with homeownership and establish a goal as a company to create at least 50 homeowners over the next year. And we're halfway through that goal now. So it's working quite well. And so for all of those pillars, we're doing things to try to address them. Childcare, partnering with local minority-owned childcare centers. We're trying to get those established in all three of the centers that we have today, which are, as Beverly mentioned, Atlanta, Dallas, and Charlotte. And we're looking a heavy focus right now on Baltimore and Detroit, having advanced conversations in both of those cities to expand the model there. Our goal is to try to create 10,000 jobs around the U.S. over the next short period. And we're doing that, by having, focused conversations with corporate entities that provide the work that would allow us to do that, to have these expansions.
So Mark, can you also speak a little bit about, there are two other bodies of work that I think it would be really interesting to have you talk about. And so I'll give both of them to you and then you can sort of answer them in order. One is the model that Chime has that we love, again, in thinking about how to regenerate existing communities. What we all know is that in a lot of those communities, there are abandoned houses, there are abandoned storefronts, right? And so when you're thinking about attracting capital to a community, they really want to see those issues addressed. Talk specifically about your model and how you adapt existing infrastructure and you come in and actually revitalize it in a way that revitalizes the community.
Yeah, thank you for that question, because it is at the center of our model, this adaptive reuse approach, which is to take underutilized assets in the communities. We've gone intentionally to high unemployment areas, and we focused on shopping malls, because generally they are, sort of the center point for a lot of communities. And so in Atlanta, we went down south to the South Lake Mall, and there was an old J.C. Penney's that was there, abandoned. And we took the J.C. Penney's, nearly 120,000 square feet, and refurbished it and made it into a state-of-the-art call center. And so then we got invited out to Dallas. In Dallas, there's a redevelopment effort on the south, in southern Dallas, of an old mall called the Redbird Mall. And same concept as in Atlanta, except for in Atlanta, the mall still exists as a mall with us there as a catalyst, with 1,500 or so people working there that get to breathe life back in that mall. In the situation in Dallas, it's going to be a mixed use number of corporate entities that'll be there. And what we've done is taken a portion of the mall and rebuilt it, just like what we did in Atlanta. And the same thing in Charlotte. And looking at an abandoned shopping area in Baltimore, as well as in Detroit.
Mark, talk a little bit also about the model, right? Because once more, one of the things about the accelerated regeneration model, I think that we're all pursuing in Baltimore City, it talks about being a job catalyst. It talks about once you have a concentration of jobs, you will attract, other investments into that area. So the catalyst is the job catalyst in Baltimore. And then we're also looking at around that, a grocery store that's going to come to a former food desert. We're looking at really education and the workforce development piece of that. And that piece is really the HBCU piece, right? So again, your model is, as I like to say crudely, not just butts in the seat. Because ultimately, again, one of the things that we really strongly believed in at Kaiser Permanente is that it is not just those numbers. Are you making an impact, and are you not just changing communities, are you transforming them? And that is not something that's one and done, but are you truly creating transformational change? And one of those ways is really the workforce of the future, and that happens to be a lot of kids from HBCUs. So please talk a little bit about how that also fits into the model and even the work that we're thinking about in Baltimore City, and why that was, the schools that are here were attractive to you.
Yeah, we as a business and a leadership team try to be smart about how we attack the challenges that our business has. And one of those challenges has to do with what we call shrinkage, and that's when folks don't come to work as scheduled, or if they attrite, or if they leave for another opportunity or whatever, that leaves gaps in the service level delivery that we're responsible for giving to our clients. And so we were just looking for, and I was kind of thinking about a way to solve that. And what came from that ideation was the fact that we could partner with historically Black colleges for students, and train those students on the particular programs that we're servicing for our clients, and then have them available on demand, that if a person doesn't come to work today, that we would have a cohort of students that would have been trained and that could actually take the work. So we developed an app in-house, and we put that app out on the app stores, called Chime In. So what happens is, if a person doesn't come to work, then our workforce management folks, by notification, sends a notice to the cohort of students. Those students then get to see what's available that day, and they can opt in and take the schedule for that day. and it gives them a chance to get introduced to corporate partners, corporate companies, and facilitates a pathway for them to work at some of those companies beyond graduation. It gives them earning potential along the way, and it also supports the missions at the HBCUs. We started with HBCUs because our model really has to do with trying to serve those that historically haven't gotten most of the opportunities. We plan to expand that model as this product. We look at it as a product gets more fully developed and more mature, that it'll be out to a larger community. But that's the concept today, and we have strong relationships today with Wilberforce University, which actually happens to be our nation's oldest historically privately owned Black college. And then we also have a relationship with Paul Quinn College in Dallas today, with active discussions with a few other schools, including there in Baltimore with Morgan and Coppin State.
So let's talk a little bit more again about sort of the work in Baltimore. And again, what we sort of call this group of passionate dreamers, the Baltimore Dream Team. And that team actually came together the way a lot of amazing things come together. It was actually through sheer serendipity. And last year, Mark and a lot of us attended the Inner City Capital Connection program at Harvard last year in November. And it was really there that, Mark and I also were talking. We were talking to other people who were really in Baltimore City, focused on really trying to regenerate particular areas of Baltimore City. And we all discovered we were all working on very similar efforts, but we weren't really meeting to figure out how to leverage each other's expertise. And so before the pandemic hit, we asked, being the person who was going to be the big job catalyst, became sort of the centerpiece around which we were going to also look at housing. And again, because once you have in your community jobs have an ability to attract people who want to live in that community. And I think increasingly with things like the pandemic, what we see is people don't want to commute, 2,000 miles to get a job with good wages. They would love to be in their community where they also have access to wonderful, affordable housing. They have access to good and healthy food. They have access to social spaces. They have access to a good quality of life. And so again, we really looked at Mark and that whole, not to put too much pressure on Mark, but we really looked at Mark and his ability to replicate and do what he did in Atlanta by opening up an operation, and 1,200 people were employed. And in that 1,200 people, again, that mall started to come alive again. Mark, I'm stealing your thunder, but that mall started to come alive again because stores that did not feel they could make any money, suddenly you have a workforce that is partially 24/7. People start to really see that, wait a minute, they want food, they need clothing, they need shoe repair, they need all of those things. So Mark, talk a little bit about, again, your vision for how you see replicating, some of what you did in those 3 locations, but with the added complication of a pandemic and your ability to help members of your team, select members, actually even work remotely when that is not an opportunity I think that most people would even think that you would be able to provide. So it's packed a lot into that question. So unpack it however you like to.
Yeah, well, first, the idea about impact, this is kind of the centerpiece for why it is that we wanted to take the model in the direction that we have. There's something called the multiplier effect that says that if for every 1 job that you create, there's a follow-on 3 jobs that get created. And if we're ever going to change the dynamics in particularly the African American community, it's going to be, in my opinion, through economics and providing opportunities and jobs and meaningful work where folks can ascend up the ladder and make money. And so that was the first thing. And, we did a survey or did a study for one client, just one of our clients. And we measured their spend over the period that we've been there in Atlanta, call it 4 years. And it was north of $100 million in impact that the dollars that corporation was spending with us. More than $100 million was the impact to the community. And when you start to put those kinds of dollars in communities that have historically not been invested in, then the dynamics really start to change. Things start to get better for the people. You start to get better services. All of a sudden now, what happens with education in the schools, it becomes a different set of circumstances. Everything gets better. And so, I just really want to, focus there and to have corporations to understand that for our business, we operate from a merit place on the basis of merit. So in other words, we're providing great customer service for our clients. It's just a baseline. That's the business that we're in. But once you go past that, the impact that we're having on the community is something that I really want corporates to hear, that they have the potential to invest in companies like mine. It's not only just Time Solutions that can be a vehicle for this. It's any number of other companies that are providing services for these corporate clients out here. That if the money was spent with them and spent in an intentional way, we can really transform things, and we can get away from the reliance on, you talked about at the beginning of this, philanthropy. I think that what I've seen as far as trends with philanthropy over the last number of years is that whoever is engaged in it generally is looking to see some sort of return from it. This is a different sort of philanthropy. You're investing in people for the long term is sustainable. So I think that's something that I want to just kind of place emphasis on. There was the last part of your question, Beverly, that there was one part that you mentioned that I wanted to say, and I don't remember what it was that you said.
No, of course, I'm on the spot. I don't even remember what the last part of it was either, but I think maybe it was really talking a little bit more specifically about sort of Baltimore, not just Baltimore, if those of you who know, Baltimore City in particular, right? And again, I know that fits a lot of your model, but why Baltimore City? And then what do you see, I know I was asking you, so with the pandemic,
Yes.
How has that changed your model in looking at, coming to Baltimore City?
Yeah, most of the folks that work for us are in a position where, a lot of the work that they have experience with is service oriented, and it doesn't lend itself to a work from home model. It was really important for us as a company to facilitate continuity for our clients, but also continuity of wage and earning potential for our employees, for the people that work for us. So we, in short order, were able to turn up a technology solution that had us in a position to get 90% of our workforce where they were working from home and continue to do that. And we can keep them safe and not exposed to COVID. And I think it's opened up a whole new world for our clients even to see and understand that work actually can get done remotely and from home. And I think what you'll see in the future is a nice hybrid of that, where people work from home and they actually do come into the center too. With respect to Baltimore and with all the cities that we're in, there's just the need by virtue of the facts that are associated with each of those communities that have us with the desire to go there. I'll give you one example for Charlotte. Charlotte, probably contrary to what most people know and believe, there was a recent study done about economic mobility with respect to Charlotte, and it ranked the top 50 or the bottom 50, whichever way you want to look at it, in terms of if you're a person born into poverty, your chances of getting out of poverty. Charlotte was actually, of those 50, 50th. So you don't have very good chances if you're in poverty in Charlotte getting out of it. And we know that through our work that we can impact that. And so it was a target for us. The same dynamics exist in Baltimore City, where high unemployment rate, where there's just a lack of investment in the community. The main point that I think should be made here on this is that there is so much resident talent that's there that I think it's a big miss now that there isn't the investment and giving the opportunity to those folks who are really talented enough to, to take advantage of it and provide good, good service. That's what we're doing. We're providing a vehicle for undiscovered, untapped talent to come to life.
Awesome. I would like to maybe piggyback on something Mark said earlier, and I think maybe even Cordell said it in his opening statement. And that really is that, if there are any chief procurement officers on the phone and you're thinking, this all sounds really great, I now need to spend more money, and not so. I was, again, very fortunate not only to have Bernard as a great leader, but to work with a wonderful chief procurement officer who said, it's sort of interesting when I think about my roles as a CPO before this role, and it really was trying to figure out how to cut our cost, right? That's the purpose of a good supply chain CPO. And she said, but now what I realize is that it's really about intentionally taking what we're already spending and viewing it as a very different way to create economic wealth that can be a driver of health in our communities. So again, for the chief procurement officers on the line, and you're thinking about, Mark and how his model is really great, but I don't really have any money. It's really not about finding more. It's about using it differently, what you're already spending. So for Kaiser, when I was there, of course I'm retired now, but what we looked at was, can we find a supplier like a Mark who is going to add value given the being awarded a contract? So again, I just wanted to stress, as Cordell said, it is not about asking chief procurement officers to spend more. We are well aware that in today's environment, with the COVID-19 and not really being sure how anybody's going to come out on the other side, that is probably a non-starter. But what we do believe is that companies are spending. They are spending just to stay in existence. And they're spending on things that keep the lights on. That means security. There's diverse companies out there that do security. They're spending on IT. They're spending on cybersecurity. They're spending on lunches. They're spending on office supplies. They're spending on contingent staffing. So if you're spending on any of those areas, I think all we're saying is, if you were to look at that differently, we believe your ability as a chief procurement officer or a Fortune 500 company or an anchor purchaser, a hospital or eds and meds, that you have the ability to look at supplier diversity in a very different way and really be part of the history of transforming America's communities, particularly in a time when we need that most.
And if I may, I like to get down to brass tacks. Beverly, you increased the spend from 1.3 to 2.3 billion in a little less than 3 years. So my first question, taking program privilege here, is how does one do that without completely revolutionizing the way you do business? Or did you have to reform the way you did business to accomplish that?
No, I think it was so one of the beauties once more of working for an amazing leader like Bernard J. Tyson, and also working with an amazing team, some of whom I know are on this call today. It really was, we sat down when Bernard gave us permission to really focus on pivoting from just counting spend. And that was the metric in the very beginning, right? That was the metric. How much are you spending? Every month we sent a report card that showed how much we were spending towards the target. And having a leader who's a visionary, I can't stress how important that is, because one of the things that our team knew, even before I moved over there, was every year I and our chief procurement officer had to literally go walk into his office with our targets for how much we're going to spend inside the organization in the coming year. And Bernard would basically say, you did that last year. That's a layup. You guys can do better. So he always challenged us to really look at how we could do better. And the way the team was structured was really that the portfolio managers, as I like to call them, would actually go out and say, what opportunities exist that may be given to a, let's say, a majority non-minority company, that we can get the same level of quality of service, that we can get the same expertise that we're used to, and provide that opportunity to a woman or minority-owned company. So the only change that really was required, so to speak, was really just declaring that we wanted to make it so. I'm not saying it was quite that simple, but we wanted to make it so. So we also put in place the targets. Every year we had to go before Bernard with the targets for the year, right? Every year we had to sit down with him and talk about, the different business units that had the biggest amount to spend. And most in organizations, that's going to be IT. It's going to be contingent labor. It's going to be construction and real estate. So any CPO on the call who has, some construction and real estate, whether you're leasing or not, whether you do IT, most people are spending billions every year in IT, and then contingent staffing, if you're, bringing in temps. So what we did is sort of look at, okay, how can we increase maybe spend in some of these areas? And we had a whole, group of categories of areas that we looked at. Marketing had a goal, legal had a goal. The big units inside the organization all had a goal, and every year that goal was increased. So our job inside my old department was to really set the metrics and the targets, get those approved at the top leadership level, disseminate out those goals, to every, the top leaders, all the regional presidents, the top leaders in the organization. And then we were there to advocate and really help to search for suppliers who could help in these various locations to really achieve that spend target. And then in the last year or so, our chief procurement officer and I said, well, let's also add another goal outside of the one about spend, and that let's look at job creation. So that's when the rubber really meets the road. If it's not a goal that gets signed off on at the highest level and supported, it's just a nice to do. So job creation became one of the metrics by which we were measured in terms of whether we were delivering on the promise of pivoting the program to making an impact. So I think, again, one of the questions I think I've sort of seen, and maybe you have, Cordell, as well, is, so what can, supplier, what can we do as CPOs? What can supplier diversity leaders do right now? And maybe that's a question, Mark, you can answer in terms of, how you've worked with us and others, how you work with supplier diversity, how you work with, corporations to really tell the story of the impact you can make. And if they get off this call, what can they do within the hour to send an email to their team to let their team know that they are actually signing on for a very different way to look at how they are supporting diverse suppliers? So again, that was long-winded, but I'll let you unpack that.
I appreciate that layup to Mark, because I'm really interested in two things with you, Mark. One is, how have you been interacting with procurement departments at large companies that require your services? And secondly, what are the values that drive the non-profitable work you do? For instance, the Chime University. As a person that creates professional development for leaders, I know how expensive that is, and that directly hits. So you've obviously voice. So I'm interested, what's driving that desire?
Well, so the first question first, we don't really interact with corporates any differently than any supplier would with their corporate partners or potential customers, in that we're basically selling on our merit, on our capability, on the fact that we actually do great work, and that this is not a social mission. The social part of it comes in as a compliment and a support for the fact that if we get it right, that we're going to be an outstanding and exceptional, partner for them. So it's the social part and the development part of what we do really is a good business ideal. Our most valuable and precious asset that we use to deliver service to our clients are our people. So the investment, which actually leads to the second part of your question, our investment in them gets paid back through the advent of lower attrition. We retain our people longer. They're more proficient in that they understand and learn the work that they're charged with providing service to our clients better. They are more engaged and they feel better about where it is that they're working. And just their spirit about how they go about their day-to-day is impacted in a positive way. And for the nature of their work, which is customer service, that's critically important. So while it's an investment, we feel like we do get a return through the things that I mentioned, better service. We retain our people, they're more engaged, they do better work. We feel like they go hand in hand. It's not a hard decision for us to make, the one that has invested in our people, involved in it. It just makes good business sense.
Great. Two more questions from our audience, Mark. One is, they're curious, this is Andres, how do you choose a specific city? One, what are the cities that you're in? And is New Orleans on the list?
Actually, New Orleans is one of the cities that's in our list, and it's a wide open list, and it has to do with the dynamics that I mentioned. Underserved communities where there's jobs that are needed, and the ability for us to attract a customer to support the work that we would put there. And that's the real basis for making a decision on a city, is where it is, and talking to our corporate partners where they have interest for the options that we would give them, which are a variety of cities right now. We're picking up the momentum that we have today, in particularly Detroit and in Baltimore, because in the case of Baltimore, it started out with conversations through one of our current customers, and then and their interest in doing work and having an impact in Baltimore, that being Kaiser. And then in Detroit, there are a couple of corporate partners that are potential customers that have an interest in how it is that they can invest in our model and have an impact in the city that they have headquarters in, which is a lot about what the drivers are for some of these corporates. It has to do with cities that they have an interest in. So to the extent that we could come to every city, we're up for it and open for it. It just has to have the corporate support and the work for us to be able to make it happen.
I'm seeing, I have questions coming from different boxes here. This is why I always ask folks, please put in the chat box for Q&A, just so I can look in one place. But I'll combine two. One is, what are the other industries, if there are any, that the Chime model would work? Mm-hmm. Two is, how are you structured? Are you a benefit, a B Corp? Are you a publicly traded organization? Do you have impact funds investing in you and that fuels your growth? How do you do business on the corporate side?
Yeah, we are a privately held, family-owned company. This is our family's third company that we've been involved in. All of them have had a focus, actually fourth, because my son has a business that's focusing community building too, called The Gathering Spot. They're doing really well in Atlanta and now going to DC and to LA. But our mindset is really about how can we have an impact, and and as far as the question about what other industries that it can apply to any number of industries. Beverly mentioned earlier grocery stores. If there are entrepreneurs that are in that space, that is definitely something that could create jobs and have health outcomes associated with it. I don't really feel like it's relegated to any or exclusive to any industry. Whatever work it is that can be done anywhere can be done in an underserved community. And that's the way I would think we should think about it. It's really all about the investment in the community for whatever the service is.
Great. Beverly, question for you. Do you know of resources that gather names of diverse suppliers, and where can supply officers access this information easily without all of the attendant costs?
So there are lots of, sort of national organizations. And of course, most corporations are members of organizations like the National Minority Development Council, the NMSDC. And they also have branches in regions, right? And so the NMSDCs, those minority development councils, really are there to sort of be the bridge between the supplier and the corporation. They do advocacy, they do training, they maintain a database of good suppliers, and typically in a non-pandemic year, they also have face-to-face meetings where you network, right? You actually get a chance to, as I like to call it, grip and grin with people and really hear their story. You hear of a small supplier who's doing amazing work, and you think, wow, I would like for that person to be part of my supply chain. There's also the organization that is very similar for women-owned businesses. So WeBank also has its own functions and trainings, and they're also certifying bodies, right? So for most of us who are members of the $1 billion, and I say us because I still feel like I'm still with Kaiser, who are members of the $1 billion roundtable, the spend that you see broadcast is actually certified spend. So lots of organizations can actually be spending more, but it is not necessarily certified. Therefore, when it gets audited, it doesn't count. Mm. So WeBank, NMSDC are all certifying agencies. Then you also have the NGLCC, the National Gay and Lesbian Chamber of Commerce, which is also the certifying agency for LGBTQ companies. And then you still have, you also have recently the $1 billion roundtable adopted. Previously, when I was there, except for my last year, certified spend was really with women and minority owned companies, right? And then, but veterans were, you could, to have veteran spend, and you needed to go after veteran spend, but veteran spend actually became a way to also qualify for the $1 billion roundtable. So veteran spend now, if all of you chief procurement officers out there who are dealing with veteran-owned companies and they're certified, that's one way also for you to achieve that $1 billion in spend to become a member of the $1 billion roundtable. They're both certifiers, but they also maintain their own databases. And even more than that, they are very connected often to a lot of the suppliers in their space. So you can pick up the phone and say, I'm looking for these 3 or 4 suppliers. They need to meet this qualification, and they actually can help you locate those. The other piece of it is, I think a lot of large entities maintain their own databases, right? So if you wanted to do business, again, with Kaiser, you would register in the database. And when there is a request for proposal that goes out, the team would actually look in that database to see if there's a supplier in there that potentially meets all of those qualifications. So there are different ways. And so corporations don't, again, we make it easy. When you're a supplier diversity professional, we really make it easy for our chief procurement officers to really go out and source with the kinds of companies like Chime Solutions that are really going to be a driver for wealth. And right now, with the pandemic sweeping through, sort of destructive force, wealth can also correlate to health. So yeah, we need people with good paying jobs, but we also know that people who typically are living in areas where they don't have the resources also have worse health outcomes. So you can really do both things at one time by simply being more intentional in your spend and really finding those suppliers that are not that hard, who can actually help you to create wealth and also therefore contribute to the long-term health of the nation.
Now, Beverly, you mentioned a program at Harvard where you actually met Mark. Could you speak a little more about that program and what it does for sourcing professionals and companies?
So one of the things, again, when our team at Kaiser, when we talked to Bernard and said, we really want to expand the tent more, right? And bring in more suppliers who can actually address our supply chain needs. But what we also said is, but we know it's really unfair, right? When people say, well, I can't find anybody. Well, okay, maybe you're not looking at that in the right way. So what we said, what Bernard and our team talked about is, okay, there's a program out of Harvard called the Inner City Capital Connection Program. And we basically said to Bernard, we would love to sponsor that program, have Kaiser sponsor it, be a sponsor, and have them actually work in geographic areas, very specific cities where people basically, say, I have this supplier I think is really great. Not necessarily to do business with Kaiser, but what we know is if you are in Oakland, you do business with Kaiser, you have Clorox there, you have major corporations. So if you're able to develop the capacity to scale your business and grow and create jobs, it really, it doesn't matter whether you get a contract with Kaiser. If you get one with somebody else and you're actually providing jobs, that is a really good outcome. So for the past, I believe, maybe 5 years now, Kaiser Permanente has partnered with the Inner City Capital Connection Program to train, and I can't recall the numbers, but to train not our suppliers, or suppliers that we actually help to identify, but they do it for other large organizations, Federal Express, Bank of America, and we call it an MBA on steroids. It's a very intensive program to help the small businessmen or women understand how to do operations and marketing and strategy and finance so that, again, they can actually be the source of growth in these communities. So part of the accelerated regeneration model that Mark is sort of the catalyst for is you get a Mark in there to really create those jobs in a community, but then we need that ecosystem to also be sustainable because Mark, by his sheer virtue of being there, if you can develop, 100 or so small businesses that can actually support Mark and Kaiser and Johns Hopkins and all of these other institutions, you really do create a multiplier effect. So the role for us of the catalyst is just that. They're job driver, they create in quick, fast, and in a hurry, but the role of the sustainable business piece of it is the one that we've actually been partnering quite effectively with the Inner City Capital Connection Program.
Great, thank you. So basically what I heard, if I want to be Mark Wilson, I have to go to this Inner City Capital. Just kidding. Mark, question. So the pandemic, as Beverly has noted, is having some serious economic effect. This is sometimes good, sometimes bad, depending on what business you're in. I know that part of your business is a real estate play on the corporate side. I just wonder, are there things that you're especially hopeful or concerned about given what's happening to our economy as a result of COVID-19?
Yeah, definitely a concern. I mean, there's so many folks that have lost work and so many businesses that, that have, gone out of business because of the impact of COVID. And I actually think, it's the government, as they're trying to figure out creative ways to do things. There's one of my colleagues, Ashok Bhairavan, who's on my team, who's doing some work right now, that's studying some of this at a graduate level, working on his PhD on this. And we were talking about this. He had an idea that he felt like that if the government would incentivize corporations from a tax standpoint to invest in minority-owned businesses, then we get a chance to not have some of the impacts of COVID be as impactful as they've been. So, incentivize, give them a tax break for the amount of spend that they would have with, or investment that they would have in a minority or an underserved community, and reward them for doing the things that could have impact. From a tax standpoint, the meaningful things, smart, thoughtful things about how to get at this. But for sure, COVID has been impactful. We've had it as a goal to not have, not have it reach or impact our people. So we've been able to keep most of our folks working by deploying the strategy to work from home. In the real estate, well, I think while we will have a hybrid going forward, we're going to still need the brick and mortar that we have investment in, and we'll continue to do that. A large part of our success is built around culture, and it is very difficult to have culture that's all virtual. We still need to be around each other, and so I don't see that being that critical element of what we do, going away. We still plan to make the investment in the brick and mortar in our model.
Great. And as we are concluding this amazing call, I wonder, Mark and Beverly, if you all could speak to those that aspire to be you. They want to be Mark Wilson with very successful exits and family-owned businesses that are thriving in multiple cities. What would you say to the 25-year-old version of yourself, Mark?
Yeah, I would just tell them that if I reflect on any measure of success that I've had, it's because I've not let any break that I've gotten past me. I've tried to really take advantage of anything that's been afforded to me in terms of an opportunity or a break. And you have to put in the work to take advantage of the breaks that come your way. And beyond that, if they knew the humble beginnings that I have as a person, they would know that it's actually achievable and possible. The saying that everybody can do what they want to if they put their mind to it, there's a lot of truth to it. Just maximize the breaks that you get.
Great, thank you. Beverly, a slightly younger version of yourself, what would you say?
Okay, that would be a lot younger version of myself. But so I think one of the conversations I had with Mr. Tyson as I was retiring is that I was saying to him, I really believe that the work we do in supplier diversity is righteous work. And what I meant by righteous work is that you have to believe that the work you're doing has an ability to make that impact, right? And it's the impact that goes beyond you and your tenure. It's the impact that goes beyond whether you want to get up and do that work or not. You really need to feel in your core that you can make a difference in whatever it is you're doing. And so I think part of it is, to any of those who would be my younger self or anybody out there who they're looking at supplier diversity as potentially a job for them, be passionate. Be passionate and be crazy bold in your thinking and believe, sincerely in your gut that you can make a difference. And then what happens is, in some weird kind of very trite way, the universe can conspire to make it work and to make it happen. So I would just sort of say, I know it's trite, but it really is, find something that just so energizes you that you really want to get up every day and do that and work on some part of that. And then I think you will actually find that you can find a way to be successful. So that's probably what I wish I had known when I was 25, stumbling around for what my life would look like. But I think that's sort of the advice I would actually give my younger self.
Great. Thank you, Beverly. Thank you, Mark. This has been a most inspiring hour with you all. And I want to say to our audience that's listening, every reference that they made to organizations and lists, all of that will be available in the synthesis note that we send out with the produced recording of this webinar, and will live on the Aspen website, as well as their contact information. We thank you again for joining us. We come to you again on September the 10th with Professor Joseph Nye, with his new book, Do Morals Matter? Presidents and Foreign Policy, from FDR to Trump. Thank you all again. Have a wonderful weekend, and we'll see you next time.
All right, bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.